Chris Neely from Lookout Santa Cruz is my next guest. Hi, Chris.
Hey.
You just said that the election will never end. Well, it will end on March 5th, actually. And we all just got our mail-in ballots a couple weeks ago, and they're sitting there unopened. And there's this giant state ballot, which has 68 pages of one proposition, if you deign to read it.
Yes.
I have not decided what I think about it. I'm curious about your take on this and other races, Santa Cruz County or statewide. Let's start with that one. That's Proposition 1A, I think. And it's supposed to build 11,000 mental health beds. I thought that was a good segue from kooky side of crazy to that. But it gives the state more control over these monies. And it might take something away from the county. So which is it? Is it great? Is it horrible? Is it somewhere in between?
This is actually one, I just had a meeting where this came up, and I was like, wow, I have not thought about Prop 1 really at all. I've been so focused on the county and the local elections. But in that meeting, we were just talking about how it seems to be really supported by mayors and city representatives, but, counties are not really for it because it's going to slash some of their funds. And for Santa Cruz County, I mean, it's a county that's already cash strapped.
But it's also a county with very few mental health beds. They send people to other counties when they are mentally ill in crisis, and their parents can't even go see them. So that's a problem. If building more beds will help that, great. But will it also mean fewer resources for prevention? It's not clear. I think I need to do a whole show on that one.
Yeah, I think it's worth it. And the mental health response in Santa Cruz County is also worth a show, and the staffing shortages at the behavioral health division, and how the county jail is the largest mental health facility in the county.
And how the ER has become the holding place for cycling people in and out of the emergency room where they should not be in the hallway on a gurney. So we could go on, but this is an attempt to get homeless mentally ill people off the street, which is a travesty in and of itself that we even have that. So I guess we'll go back and read the 68-page ballot. Let's go to the Senate race.
Sure.
This is the first time it's been in play in California in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Dianne Feinstein almost outlived every single person that might have challenged her position. But so now we have 4 candidates running, 1 Republican, 3 Democrats. This is a primary, so it's really about who's going to run against who.
Right.
What's your take on where we stand right now? You could see Adam Schiff has more money than everyone else, but beyond that, he's also ahead by 25%.
And I saw a poll that Garvey is behind him in second place, which I was very surprised about. And I came on here and spoke with you about it. I spoke with 3 of the Senate candidates when they came through town: Barbara Lee, Adam Schiff, and Katie Porter. And all of them were very smart, astute, different crowds, though, at each one, of course. You had the really establishment, kind of entrenched Democrat machine at Adam Schiff's event. Katie Porter, it was a Democratic Women's Club event. So, a lot of women in the crowd, but a lot of people who were unsure how they were going to vote. But she's just such a powerful speaker and really knows her way around a whiteboard. And then Barbara Lee, had her event, which I thought was a great move, in Watsonville. And so had a lot of the South County crowd, and saw Santa Cruz for Bernie representation, and, a lot of the more left part of our political spectrum. This race I'm really interested in. I don't know who's going to win. Adam Schiff has been out fundraising everyone. It's going to be a chance for us to really see where California is. What flavor of Democrat do we want? And they all represent a different flavor.
And age, like it is in the presidential race, seems to be coming up. I read a pretty convincing editorial that was saying, look, this person, we want them to be in for as long as possible, because that's how you get clout.
Exactly.
That's how you get seniority. That's how you get influence and good positions on different committees. And, Katie Porter's the youngest of the 3. Mm-hmm. Adam Schiff is in his 60s. She's in her 50s. Barbara Lee's 77.
Yeah, 77.
And it's just like, it's such a difficult decision. I'm sure people are going to vote on more than just their age, but that was really something that gave me pause. And we've been represented by women in California for the longest time, and there's 2 women running. So that's going to be all jingling around in our heads before
Yeah.
election day. And I'm sure some people have already voted.
Yeah, I'm sure. But like I said, that's really one that I'm very keen to see the results on, because I don't know where California stands. Adam Schiff does represent, he's got a lot of clout already in the House just from his leadership on the January 6th committee or the impeachment trials. And, some might argue that he already kind of has some of that clout that maybe you'd have to work towards as a junior senator to become, the more senior one. But, Katie Porter would probably be starting near the ground floor and clout-wise, but she'd be there for a long time. And, she's going to
also
work
really
hard.
feisty.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing that comes across, is she's not scared to take on the status quo, nor is Barbara Lee. She was the one person voting against the Afghan war. When it was really everybody was going for it, she said, this is wrong. And guess what? I think she was right.
Yeah. And a lot of people I spoke to locally have just said, my vote's just going to be with Barbara Lee because of that. And
thing.
That is, that's all they needed to see. Some people I've spoken to, elected officials locally, I won't name them, but they feel like Adam Schiff is someone who could get them funding for things like the Pajaro levy, some of these big projects, some of these big transportation projects. It would be great to have a senator who understands these things and understands the way government works. That'd be more of the pragmatic vote. Katie Porter is like somewhere in between the morality vote and the pragmatic vote. She's someone who, she has an identity in the Senate. She's feisty, single mom, raising kids, and very smart on financial issues and the economy. But I still think her identity is still kind of growing. It's not really sure where she'll go, but I don't think California can lose. I think there's good 3 Democratic candidates.
It's unlikely a baseball player will be our next senator. Are you saying?
Yes, although it sounds like he may reach the runoff, which
he may, and sometimes real cynical political observers might say that's exactly what Adam Schiff wants. He would rather run against a Republican than a Katie Porter. For his purposes, Katie Porter might have something different to say about that. Well, we shall see about that race. So moving from the state to the county, we have a lot of supervisors up for election this time. And it could really shift the balance, gender balance, which has been all guys up until now.
Yeah, and
be
all
big.
White men up until last year.
Yeah, so Justin Cummings broke that.
And Felipe Hernandez.
And they both broke that glass ceiling. But now we have run down some of the women that are running these different races and remind people of approximately what these districts are, because even people who live in those districts don't always remember what their district is. Yeah,
so in District 1, this is the one race that will be decided for sure in the primary. District 1 is Lonnie Faulkner. She's challenging Manu Koenig, who's running for re-election to his second term. District 1 really is the Live Oak, SoCal area. You get a little bit of Pleasure Point in there, East Cliff Drive.
And what about Manu, do you think, drew a challenger? Because you don't always see that.
Well, it's an interesting question. That race has been so personal. Manu came in, he unseated a 3-term incumbent, backed largely, John Leopold, backed largely by money from folks supporting Greenway. He was the executive director of Greenway for a while, and Greenway, as I'm sure many listeners in Santa Cruz know, was the group that was advocating for just a trail, or at least a trail for now, and maybe rail later. They wanted to rip up the rail infrastructure and just build a kind of multimodal trail between Watsonville and Santa Cruz. So I think he came in, he parachuted into that seat in a rather unlikable way. I think people are still steaming from that issue, from that election. I've heard this race described as John Leopold versus Manu Koenig Part 2. Because
of the positions of the candidates or the way they're talking about each other?
Lonnie is someone who really respects John Leopold. She, on the campaign trail, she has said that she's really just kind of a vessel for this part of the community that feels unrepresented by Manu. I think John's kind of taken her under his wing a little bit. He endorsed her really early. They talk about the same issues. And I think if it wasn't Lonnie, then it would be someone else maybe who was, under that John Leopold tree.
And how would you characterize that in terms of, it's not really money versus low income or working class people, but how would you characterize the contrast between those two now, Lonnie and Manu?
Yeah, this is one we've talked about a lot in the newsroom, is really trying to figure out where they differ on issues. Now, Lonnie was leading the rail trail campaign in 2022, which was, directly opposing Manu's old company of Greenway and the organization he worked for. So they are rivals when it comes to the rail trail issue. Otherwise, it's kind of difficult to see exactly where they differ in their views. I think they both they want to see changes in the planning department. They want to build affordable housing. Manu has been criticized for not really supporting the rail trail, but he has taken votes and advocated and kind of taken that 73% that supported the rail in 2022 and tried to honor that with his votes. That it's a weird race. I think it really just comes down to people not liking Manu. Lonnie comes in really critical of Manu not being there for the district, not representing the district. She says she's speaking for school district employees, school district members, just kind of normal people in the community who feel like they just don't see Manu. They're not responded to from Manu. But, Manu has actually been, just from what I've seen in the last year and a half that I've been here, he's been probably the one supervisor who has done the most to engage his district. I mean, he's the only one that sends out a newsletter before every supervisor meeting, kind of running down the big issues that they're going to be voting on and just talking about them from like a very objective view. And he's also the only one that holds regular town halls in different parts of the district. So I'm kind of surprised to see these criticisms, but I really just chalk it up to this is just a very personal race, and people don't like Manu, and and they want to see him gone, and Lonnie's the person who's kind of taken up that anti-Manu mantle. So
it's not very helpful for voters when it's personality driven, because of all the jobs, the supervisor really is representing people who don't have a city, like the people in Bonnie Doon or the people in Live Oak. They don't have a city. So they're just represented by the county, and they provide all the services. So it's hard to imagine why personality comes into that instead of policy, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. That's one that will be decided in the primary,
so we'll know.
They're just two.
Yeah. And candidates. I hope you'll maybe, if you have time, come back on March 7th, because I have another show that day to maybe recap what the results
I would love to.
See how it did turn out.
Although I will say last year it took us quite a few weeks to figure out what the results were. So happy to come in and talk about that if that's the case.
We used to stay up late on election night. What happened? I thought we were more efficient. No, it's like gotten even more troubling to get the results, probably because of the mail-in ballots, is my guess.
Yeah. And a lot of mail-in ballots come in on election day. They don't come in before. So
you procrastinators, you're the ones, if you want your election results the night of the election, then you have to turn in your ballot a week before.
Yes, do all of your hardworking local journalists a favor and return your ballots early.
That's right, so you don't have to stay up all night. Okay, so that's one race. Other ones will be decided in November, but these are the most likely.
Yeah.
They have to tell us what they have to get in order for it to be decisive. 75%.
Yeah. So this is so in the primary, it's just the first to 50%, and if you get more than 50%, you are awarded the seat. And if no one gets 50%, then the top two vote getters face off in a head-to-head in the general election in November. Right. And that is for city council and supervisors.
So the other supervisor race is in the San Lorenzo Valley.
Yeah.
Talk about what the issues are up there and who's running for those seats. That seat that McPherson vacated out of retirement.
Yeah, that's a district with a lot of issues. And, with the other two districts in the race, District 1, which is largely Live Oak, SoCal, and then District 2, which is, Aptos stretching down to Pajaro Dunes and then out to Corralitos. Those issues, the big issues in those two districts are kind of the big county issues. We talk about homelessness, housing affordability, coastal erosion, managed retreat versus armoring the coastline. I mean, these are big issues that affect everywhere in the county. In District 5, they kind of have their own issues up there. Water infrastructure is a huge issue. I mean, there's Big Basin Water Company was a private water utility that recently had to go under what is basically a conservatorship with a law firm that is now overseeing all the finances because they just botched the service for this 1,200 customers who were getting water from them. People weren't getting water for weeks and regular shutoffs. And then the biggest issue in District 5 is the pace of the rebuild after the CZU wildfire, which is, and I don't know the exact number, but it is 911 lots burned, more structures than that, and only a fraction. I mean, at some point this year, it was still under 30. I think it might be under 40 now, or around 40 now, have rebuilt and are reoccupied. But people are having real issues up there getting permits, getting the right testing done, getting the right septic systems done. So I think voters in District 5 are really looking for a candidate who can just solve that. And it's a very complicated issue. There's different layers of regulation that people are running into. But that is, I mean, almost more than 1,000 people were displaced by that fire, and only dozens have, reclaimed their home.
It's not too different up in Bonnie Doon in District 3.
Yeah.
So we have the same issue up there, that just the snail's pace. I am finally seeing some building happening.
Yeah.
Whereas there was 10%, I think, before. So that's a biggie. And who are the people promising to solve this? It's interesting when you have something that overlaps state regulations where people are trying to cut through red tape, but there's entanglements that go beyond the county's ability, right? So
Yeah. And there are entanglements that go beyond the county's ability. Now, here's an interesting thing is that all of these candidates, with the exception of Teresa Bond, I believe, although Tom Decker might fall into this too, these are San Lorenzo Valley candidates. Bruce McPherson is a Scotts Valley representative. So he's kind of the Scotts Valley side of District 5. The San Lorenzo Valley has been wanting a representative at the county level for a long time, someone who really understands these county issues. And it looks like they are going to get that this time around. So the people running we have Monica Martinez, who is the CEO of Encompass, the largest social services nonprofit in the county. A lot of money moves through Encompass into the county social services. So Monica is someone who really understands kind of how money flows and partnerships are made and negotiations are done. And some people look at that as a positive, and some people I've talked to in District 5 don't see that as a positive. Now, her likely opponent, if there is a runoff, Chris Bradford, he is a small business owner. He is a CZU fire victim, and he is also someone who's really rallied the community and organized the community in the Big Basin water issue that I was referencing before. He's been kind of a voice of the people on the ground. Him and his wife, Antonia, have done a lot of work just trying to get as much information to people about the CZU rebuild, about the Big Basin water issues, and now he sees his next role as, representing them at the county level. I mean, it's a man with 6 kids. He owns I think it's either a jiu-jitsu or some sort of martial arts gym in Scotts Valley.
So he's a Scotts Valleyite.
He's a Boulder Creek guy, but he owns his businesses,
okay.
but he's a Boulder Creek guy.
Is he the one that has a sign that said the status quo has got to go? Is that his sign? Somebody has that as their slogan, and I thought it rhymes.
That would. I haven't seen that sign. It would not surprise me if that is Chris, because that is his message. Is that, like I was saying, that some people view Monica's ability to know her familiarity with the system as it works, government as it works. People look at a person like Chris Bradford and see someone who is going to go in and with a new lens, with a new way of thinking, is willing to just kind of turn everything upside down just to get some progress really around the CZU rebuild, but also with water infrastructure and wildfire prevention. And then they're up against Tom Decker. Now he's a home builder, small home builder.
That's who it is who had that sign.
Okay, he's another one. Yeah,
He's the one with the slogan.
Yeah.
To correct myself.
Yes, and so Tom Decker, gregarious guy. I haven't talked to him a whole lot. I interviewed him on stage for our forum that we held, but he's a home builder who, similarly, I mean, the biggest issue for everyone up there is that they are motivated by the glacial pace of the CZU rebuild. And he's a home builder, and he has stories. You know, he had an amazing anecdote about how there was a fire in Boulder Creek that burned downtown and a lot of houses, I think in the early 1900s, and it was rebuilt within at least a few years, and that was a full downtown. And now we're looking at, you know, the CZU rebuild, and these are houses and homes, and barely anything has gotten rebuilt. And, you know, his whole message is that what's changed is that there's more government now, and that's kind of his whole message, is that we need to, you know, just find a way to release people from regulation and allow them to rebuild. And because getting people back in their homes on their land is the most important thing.
I always find that interesting when someone who's super libertarian, like, government ought to be small, but I want to get my $150,000 a year paycheck, being a supervisor and going to meetings up for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But the government's the problem. I mean, government's supposed to be there to serve us. So it's not government that's the problem. It might be, you know, the people aren't being brave enough and challenging the status quo issues that they're supposed to be voting on. But the fact that there is a government doesn't seem to be. It's easy to say it's regulation.
Yes.
And those regulations are there for a reason. Maybe they've gotten twisted around to becoming obstacles over time, you know, by adding on layers. I don't know. All I know is that I've seen the lack of building myself and wondered, you know, what is it? What is the problem here? Why can't they expedite like they promised? And, you know, people have promised that and not been able to deliver. So maybe these people will. We'll have to see.
Tom is also, I don't believe he's raised any money for his campaign. He's had some non-monetary contributions to his campaign, but I think hasn't raised any, or very, very little. And same with Teresa Bond. I don't even think she has submitted any campaign forms for financial contributions. She is a trustee on the Los Gatos Saratoga Union School District. She lives at the Summit. She's very focused on mental health and the drug crisis. You know, has a lot of opinions on the CZ rebuild. She's a little bit north of that, though, and she's someone who worked in tech, and, you know, and she has not really been on the campaign trail as much. I think
it's a hard road when most of the voters are not where you're from.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
live down in the valley.
Yeah.
So that's everybody on
that's
that
the
one.
four. Yeah. And so that'll probably, you know, 4 candidates. It's likely that goes to a runoff. It's very hard to get 50% in a 4-candidate race. So we'll probably see that one come down to November.
I want to have time to talk about the city council race in Santa Cruz, but also I think we missed the Aptos race. So if we could quickly go through that and then maybe spend a little time at the end. I'm talking to Chris Neely. He's with Lookout Santa Cruz. He's their political reporter. We're talking about Santa Cruz County politics. We'll have another show about Monterey County politics before the election. So hold your horses if you're listening in Salinas or Monterey. So this election in the Aptos area, that's District 2.
Yeah. So District 2 is such a fascinating district, and I was driving through it the other day, and it stretches from I guess you would call it the southern portion of Capitola, so encompassing Aptos and going all the way down to Pajaro Dunes, stretching out to Corralitos and Freedom, and even out to Nicene Marks. So it's a big district. Coastal erosion is a huge issue. This is where a lot of the high-value real estate along the coast is located.
Right on the beach.
Right on the beach. and I mean, when you see the storm damage photos from 2023 or even, you know, late last year, earlier this winter, you know, it's often Rio Del Mar and parts of Capitola and Sea Cliff Beach. And so this is an area where coastal erosion is one of the big issues, and certainly one of the ones that the county will have some influence in, because the county is drafting up its local coastal land use plan and figuring out how to treat coastal properties, whether to keep approving permits so they can armor against coastal erosion, or to stop giving permits and encourage people to retreat from the coast. So that's one of the big issues, and one of the big issues kind of separating some of the candidates. So the candidates are Kim DeSerpa. She is a Pajaro Valley Unified School District trustee. Kristen Brown, the current mayor of Capitola. We have Bruce Jaffe, president of the Soquel Creek Water District Board. He's been the president. He's been on the board there for 20 years. Very smart guy. Has helped that water district really turn itself around and get water usage and prices down. He understands very technical issues. And then David Schwartz, who is pretty conservative. He's a, kind of government get off my back kind of guy. He's really using the podium at the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors, the public comment podium, to do a lot of his campaigning. He's showed up at every meeting, I think, for the last, I don't know how long, and it has commented on almost every item.
So you know where he stands.
you know where he stands, yeah. And his campaign is in earnest. Now, Tony Crane is the fifth, and he's someone who's really just trying to bring attention to an issue that happened in his neighborhood about kind of a vulnerable mental health facility coming into his neighborhood, and him not really being, him feeling like the county and actually Encompass did some backroom dealing to expand that facility without really engaging the public first. And
that's a very personal kind of reason to run for office,
yeah.
I have to say.
So he's
grudge.
running with a vengeance. Yeah.
And that doesn't take you far. We are just about out of time. So any last minute thoughts? Unfortunately, we just have to go because there's another show coming on. But in closing, what should we be watching for the Santa Cruz City Council? Just like in a very short 30-second wrap up.
Yeah, definitely watch District 1. I think that's an interesting race. There are no incumbents in that race. District 5 is another one. No incumbent in that race. You have the person who organized the first Starbucks union versus a former city employee.
Joe Thompson,
right. And then, of course, Measure M, which I hope to come on here and talk about at some point. That is a testy election, and that'll tell us a lot about where Santa Cruz stands as a city and how they feel about development. So,
well, thanks for all your reporting on the election. We really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll run some of those forums on the next couple of shows. So
yeah.
Thanks so much for organizing them and educating the public about this important election.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on. I always love coming in the studio.
Love having you. Chris Neely of Lookout Santa Cruz. I'm Rachel Ann Goodman at KSQD 90.7 FM, KSQD Santa Cruz, KSQT Prunedale, and streaming live on the web at ksqd.org. It's time for First Person Singular, and that will be followed by The Kooky Side of Crazy. Stay tuned.